This week's Parsha begins with a grammatical puzzle. Moses tells the Israelites that God places before them blessing and curse. But when he describes the blessing, he uses an unexpected word. Instead of saying, if you obey the Torah says that you obey. Is this simply an odd turn of phrase, or is the Torah hinting at something deeper? This week we'll follow this grammatical anomaly on a remarkable journey, from the Bible to the rabbis, from Maimonides to the Sefer HaChinukh to Aristotle and contemporary philosophy. Along the way, we'll explore a radical Jewish idea. Perhaps the reward for doing good is not something we receive after the fact, but something we become. Perhaps blessing is not simply a consequence of our actions, it is the character those actions create. Welcome to Madlik. My name is Jeffrey Stern, and at Madlik we light a spark or shed some light on a Jewish text or tradition. Along with Rabbi Adam Mintz, we host Madlik Disruptive Torah on your favorite podcast platform, and now on YouTube and Substack. We also publish a source sheet on Sefaria, and a link is included in the show notes. This week's Parsha is Re'eh. Is Judaism really a religion of reward and punishment, or is it something far more profound, a religion about becoming? Join us for Becoming Good. Rabbi, you're in Eretz Israel, in Jerusalem, the holy city of Jerusalem. How are you today or this evening?
I'm great. Jerusalem is great. It was a hot day today, but a wonderful, cool evening. And we had sushi because what more Jewish food could you have with sushi for dinner? So let's get down to becoming good.
Sounds great. Rabbi and I were davened in the same Beit Knesset, Beit Chaverim, in the holy city of Westport, Connecticut this last Shabbat. So it's rare that we're in the same room, let alone the same shul together. But that was a lot of fun.
That was a treat.
So it was. So we're in Deuteronomy 11:26, and it says, Re'eh anachi noten lifnechem hayom bracha v'klala. See, this day I set before you blessing and curse. Blessing if you obey the commandments. Et bracha asher tishma'u. We'll get to that in a second because it's not quite if. Of the eternal your God that I enjoin upon you this day. Verse 28, and curse if you do not obey. Here, when it gets to the curse, it says the word we're expecting to hear. V'hakalala im lo tishma'u. If you do not obey the commandments of the eternal your God, but turn away from the path that I enjoin you this day and follow other gods whom you have not experienced. So it's a big moment. We're going to end up looking at two different mountains. You're going to be given a choice between good and bad, blessing and curse. But as I said, the word for the blessing is strange. Everett Fox says the blessing that you hearken to. So he has to add in parentheses, the blessing provided that you hearken to. We're expecting on both sides of the coin this conditional, if, but we don't find it in the Hebrew. It sounds as if asher tishma'u, that you will keep. It's very positive leaning, but it's not what we expect.
It's interesting that Everett Fox wants to add the word provided that, because again, that's what you would expect, but that's not the impression you get from the text itself.
But by putting it in parentheses, at least he lets us read it true to the text. The blessing that you hearken to. It's just a descriptive, not prescriptive, not contingent at all. Rashi says, Et bracha al manat asher tishma'u. He is not pulling any punches. He is saying on condition that you should obey. The translator says he's translating asher tishma'u. But I think the translator is not off the mark. Rashi is really trying to explain what it means, but no one seems to focus on the fact that it actually says it when it comes to the klala. It
Right.
says, im lo tishma'u. So now we get to our friend the Ibn Ezra, and the Ibn Ezra says as follows: the blessing if ye shall hearken, for if you hearken, behold, you are blessed. A blessing means an addition of the good. A curse means a diminution. The word klala, curse, is related to the word kala, light. So he almost sees it as an additive, as a progression. The klala, the curse, is you're going to be, there's going to be mass taken away from you. And
Right.
on the other hand, a blessing means that you have an addition, a
Well,
hosafah, if you will.
isn't it interesting that the Ibn Ezra sees it in mathematical terms, right? That you'll add or you subtract. And that the word klala from the word kala, which means to decrease in number. That's a fantastic explanation.
I think so, but also the Hebrew is great because it says ki bishma'achem. In the listening, hine atem mevurachim. You are blessed. We heard the sermon in the synagogue we were at this Shabbat talked about how many times, and we've talked about this too, the word shmiyah, the word listening, is mentioned in the book of Deuteronomy, of Devarim. But what I love here is what's the expression about that? It's not the proof is in the pudding or the truth is in the eating. The point is, kig b'shmachem, with listening, hine atem mevurachim. You are blessed. He does try to finesse the fact that it's not conditional, but it's actually kind of it's organic, if you will.
I'll just want to tell you, based on the sermon that we heard, Sharon asked me a question. She said, should the Torah, rather than focusing on listening, focus on action? Why is listening good enough? Shouldn't it say, if you do, this is the blessing, with the condition that you shall obey, but not listen, but actually obey? What's interesting in the translation of Rashi that I just noticed now is that Rashi is sensitive to Sharon's question. Because it says with the condition that you should obey. That's not what Rashi says. Rashi says Asher Tishma'u with the condition that you should listen. But Rashi doesn't like that you should listen, because listen's not enough. Rashi makes it, well, the translation of Rashi makes its own interpretation, which is listening is not enough. Listening is only helpful if it's the first step towards obeying. That's great. Sharon's going to love this.
Okay, and I think maybe some of the material that we're going to get to later are going to get into this concept of praxis as opposed to doxis, as opposed to listening and belief, this concept of actually doing and the effect that it has. But let's move on with our wonderful texts. So, of course, this concept that the Ibn Ezra is hinting at, and I think that the Hebrew naturally intones this sense of, and that is the blessing, reminds me of Ben Azai in Pirkei Avot 4:2. He says, be quick in performing a minor commandment, as in the case of a major one, and flee from transgression, for one commandment leads to another commandment, and transgression leads to another transgression, for the reward for performing a commandment is another commandment. Or in Hebrew, it comes off much better. The reward for performing a mitzvah, a good deed of doing good, is to do more good. And the reward for committing a transgression, doing an avera, is another transgression. That to me resonated a little bit. What the Ibn Ezra was saying was that it's not as though the blessing is external to the activity. It is the activity. And the reward is, again, not external. It is doing more of the same thing. I did note that similar to Akev, where Rashi starts talking about using your heel to go over minor commandments, we do have this sense of Be careful of the small acts. The small acts are like that drop of water in a puddle. They make ripples, and they have an effect. But I do believe that this Pirkei Avot Ben Azai text is relevant. Don't you think so?
There's no question. That's a great text.
So there's one more in Pirkei Avot that I was thinking of, and that's in Pirkei Avot 1:3. It says, Antigonus, a man of Socho, received the tradition from Shimon the righteous. He used to say, do not be like servants who serve the master in the expectation of receiving a reward. Ella have ka'avadim v'samshim et harav shelo al manat lekabel pras, but rather be like servants who serve the master without the expectation of receiving an reward, and let the heaven be upon you. There is definitely a very strong thread in our tradition, Rabbi, that goes against this whole concept of reward and punishment. And there's a very strong thread that the reward is the reward, and the punishment is the punishment. You pick your tail, you make the bed that you sleep in, type of thing. But it's not a quid pro quo. It is what it is, and you shouldn't be doing these commandments in order to receive that award. And so the reading of our parsha should actually be not im, because im implies on condition, if. It really should be an asher, that. And that's where I'm sensing this resonance, both in terms of the interpretation of the verse, but also in the rabbinic tradition.
Yeah, well, that's interesting about what your reason for fulfilling the commandment should be. Should you have an ulterior motive? We all have ulterior motives, right? We go to work so we can make a lot of money. We go to school so we can be smart. We get married because we want a big family. Everything's with an ulterior motive. It's really surprising to say that you should serve God without an ulterior motive. I just want to point out how surprising that is, how out of the ordinary.
Maybe the word you're looking for is radical. Clearly, in the world of religion,
What do you mean,
I
Jeffrey? Disruptive is the word you want.
We're all on the same page. Yes, it is absolutely radical, but I think to read it back into asher is the most exciting part. But nonetheless, to recognize, because let's not fool ourselves, Rabbi, there are plenty of rabbis in the rabbinic tradition that talk about schar and onesh, about punishment. Some of them will say, why do bad things happen to tzaddikim in this world? Because they're going to get their rewards in the world to come, and vice versa. There's plenty of that. But what I was focusing on, whether we call it radical or disruptive, is this very strong sense that for some of them anyway, it wasn't about brownie points, and it wasn't about getting a fraskin punim, a slap on the face. It was doing it for no ulterior motives, as you said a second ago. So let's go to the Mishnah Torah, Maimonides' Rules of Repentance 5:4. And this, of course, is very apropos as we start now transversing
the
to
month
the
of
high
Elul,
holidays.
that's correct. Right.
Yes. So he writes, if God would decree for a person to be righteous or wicked, or if something existed in a person's nature that would pull him in a certain path, or to a certain opinion, or to a certain characteristic, or to certain action, like the stupid astrologers make up, in other words, you're predestined, how could God command us through the prophets, do this and don't do that? Improve your ways and do not follow your wickedness. When from the beginning of his creation, it was already decreed for him, or his nature pulls him towards something that he cannot escape. And what place would there be for the entire Torah? Good question. So what Maimonides comes out to say is that Virtues we acquire by first having actually practiced them. This is what's going to resonate with Sharon. It's about how you act, just as we do the arts. We learn an art or craft by doing the things that we shall have to do when we have learned it. For instance, men become builders by building houses, harpers by playing on the harp. Similarly, we become just by doing just acts, temperate by doing temperate acts, brave by doing brave acts. So this I just quoted from Aristotle, actually, but if I go back to Maimonides, he says, therefore, we judge a person according to his action. If he did good, we will do good by him. And if he did evil, we do poorly by him. As the prophet says in Isaiah, this is from your Malachi, this is your own doing, and they have chosen their own ways. So Maimonides, a true Aristotelian, believes that it is doxa, it is what you do that basically makes who you are. And I think that is a very, very strong Jewish belief, is it not?
It sure is. And again, that requires some analysis that we're going to do in terms of what's the relationship between listening and practice. Now, the Rambam is aware of this question, as we'll see in a minute. The Rambam believes that you can't do if you don't first listen, right? You can't be a good doer if you're not a good listener.
Correct. Absolutely. So let's look at Mishnah Torah in repentance in 3:4. He says, therefore, a person needs to see himself all year long as if he is half innocent and half guilty, and also see the whole world half innocent and half guilty. If he sins one sin, he has tilted herself and the whole world to the side of guilt and caused its destruction. If he does one mitzvah, he has tilted herself and the whole world to the side of innocence and caused redemption and rescue, as it says. So we talked a second ago about the small little acts, even the small commandments that somehow or other the commentaries seem to be focused on week in and week out. I think it comes from this aspect as well, that if it is action that affect who our character ends up being, then even the smallest action can become a tipping point. And I think that is amazing about this concept of being how you be is how you will become. And therefore, you have to watch even the small things. I love this concept that the whole world could be on the tipping point. And I am using Sefaria's translation, and I love the fact that it's in the feminine. It says herself.
Yeah, no,
I hadn't
when
realized.
you were reading the feminine, I was sure that this was some liberal, Connecticut thing. But, turns out that you're following Spalia. That's very funny. Now, let me just say, of course, that this Maimonides is based on a famous Mishnah in the Tractate of Sanhedrin that says that's why human beings were created as one, that everybody comes from Adam, or everybody comes from Adam and Eve. That if you save one person, it's as if you saved the whole world. And if you kill one person, it's if you killed the whole world. And if you do one good act, then you save the whole world. Means it's an amazing thing to think of 8 billion people in the world, and then to think about the fact that the world was started by one person. So therefore, we need to look at each individual person and each individual act as if they are the entire world. That's an absolutely remarkable idea.
It is. And again, not getting back to this gender issue, if you read the Hebrew is written gender neutral, which is unbelievable that the
Right.
person who made the translation picked up on that. Chita echad, one person sins, harei hachriya et atzmo ve'et kol
It's,
ha'olam.
it's, it's
So this is an example of a small little action. How you translate a world can change generations, can make us look at the Rambam and read him in the Hebrew text all over again. I just love it.
Jeffrey, the next Sparia dinner, we're going to have to make a point about what they changed with that little translation. That's fantastic.
You got it. And now, a word from our sponsor. If there's one thing we value at Matlik Podcast, it's reading texts and talking about them. That's why I'm excited to share something I created called Voice Gift Play. It fits in the palm of your hand like a remote control and clips onto any book. It's inspired by those old school museum audio guides, but this is personal. Voice Gift Play stores up to 10 hours of audio across 999 numbered recordings. You simply enter a number to record a comment, memory, or explanation, and enter the same number to play it back. It's perfect for B'nai Mitzvah practicing their laning, capturing Grandpa's favorite tune, or recording Chad Gad Yar in a voice that matters. Go to voice.gift. That's www.voice.gift and use code MADLIK for 15% off. Thanks. And now back to our podcast. So anyway, this concept of small little things is brought up again in the Talmud in Yuma, which comes from Yom Kippur. That is the tractate that deals with the high holidays of Yom Kippur. And the sages taught the following with regard to the verse, and do not impurify yourselves with them, so that they should not thereby become impurified. A person who impurifies himself a bit, they impurify him greatly. There is, getting back to these small little acts, there is a multiplier effect. You take a little step, and the rest of the step is taken for you, with you, support of you. If a person purifies himself by his own volition below on earth, they impurify him all the more so in heaven. I love this idea that not only is doing a small act of good or bad capable of tipping the scale, but it is also, it's a trigger, and it's a trigger for other forces. And all of these concepts, I believe, and I'm arguing, are concepts that create the the velocity and the movement and the progression of doing good without a quid pro quo. It's this sense of maximizing. It's the sense of naturally moving a little and it becomes a tipping point. Moving a little and it becomes taken to the next power. But of all the sources that I found today, the one that most surprised me and blew me away was from the Sefer HaChinukh. And the Sefer HaChinukh, I've talked about it before, is written by a dad to his son who moved away from home. And basically what he does, he goes through the Parshiot, the readings of the week, and he identifies every commandment of the 613 commandments for his son. That's his lens that he looks at each Parsha. So we get to the 16th commandment, which is do not break a bone for the Passover sacrifice. And the author of the Sefer HaChinukh takes this to mean, again, small little actions have profound effects. He says it is fitting for us to do acts that show within us the great stature which we achieved at that time. And in the act and reenactment that we do, this thing is placed in our souls for eternity. So kind of as the opposite of what maybe Lenin said about to make breakfast, you have to break a few eggs. Here we're saying is
Lenin the one who made that up?
I think it was Lenin or Trotsky or one of those good guys.
That's pretty funny. Now they quote Elon Musk who says that. Okay, that's okay.
No,
good.
It definitely wasn't Elon Musk. So the idea of not breaking the bones, of dealing with this delicately, we're eating our revolutionary meal called the Paschal sacrifice. And he says, because the act, a reenactment of what we do is placed in our souls for eternity, he goes on a few paragraphs later, you must know, he says to his son, that a man is acted upon according to his actions. actions. And his heart and all his thoughts always follow after the actions that he does, whether good or bad. And even he who in his heart is a complete sinner, and all the desires of his heart are only for evil, if his spirit shall be enlightened, and he will pull his efforts and actions to persist in Torah and commandments, even if not for the sake of heaven, he shall immediately incline towards good. And from that which is not for its own sake comes that which is for its own sake, for the hearts are drawn after the actions. So this is the answer to Sharon's question, I believe. But there is no question that this is clearly not a quid pro quo. This is clearly not paying one's penance to get redemption. There is a natural, organic process that happens when we start doing things in the right way. You know, there are people that look at Israel today and they see how open they are to the LGBTQ community. And some people have the audacity to call that pinkwashing. In other words, they're pretending as if they're open to the gay community to get their liberal, progressive brownie points. And to that, I always respond, maybe the rest of the Muslim and Arab world should pinkwash for a generation or two. Because if they did it for a generation or two, it would be true.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with aspirationally acting above your class. Aspirationally trying to act as though you could be better than you are. And that's what this is all about. And that's, I think, what this Asher is. It's a beautiful Sefer HaChinukh. What can you tell us about him? Had you known this one before? I had never seen this.
Yes. So let me just first tell you what you said, of course, is that he wrote it for his son. He lived in northern Spain in the 1200s, and he had a son the way we all have children, and he wanted to make sure that he stayed connected to Judaism. So what he did was he tried to make the parsha something that was interesting to him. And that's an amazing, idea that after the actions, our hearts will move. Acharei ha'peulot nimshachim halavavot. For the hearts are drawn after the actions. And, that's what he tells his son. That's what each generation tells the next generation. That, that do good things. Even if you don't mean it, do good things. Because our hearts are drawn after the actions. Sometimes our kids say, I don't want to do that. I don't really believe in it. I don't want to do it. No, do it. Go to shul. Study some Torah. Study the weekly portion. So, watch Madlik every single week. What's it going to mean? I don't know. But the Chinuch thought that after the hearts are drawn, the hearts are drawn after the actions.
I just think the way that the text itself is worth visiting. If you're listening to this and you have access to the Sefaria notes, to see this in the original, especially if you're a Hebrew reader, as the rabbi quoted from it, is just beautiful. And of course, we're touching upon behavioral psychology, if you will. But what I want to do is now take it into the present in terms of contemporary almost philosophy of ethics. There is an amazing concept of something called dispositional ethics, dispositional understanding of reality. And to explain that to you, there's something called conditional. We all know that if Newton taught us, and David Hume, the great empiricist, taught us, if A hits B, then B will follow that force. Everything is conditional. There is a train of thought in philosophy called dispositional. So to put it into the language of our discussion, conditional would say if you obey, then God will bless you. That's the im. Dispositional would mean listening is itself the disposition that constitutes and generates blessing. So one of the the early contemporary proponents of dispositional thinking was someone called Gilbert Ryle. And he says to possess a dispositional property is not to be in a particular state or to undergo a particular change. It is to be bound or likely to be in a particular state or undergo a particular change when a particular condition is realized. You're ready. You have the
Right.
potential. To say that glass is brittle is not to describe something presently occurring in the glass. You'll only know glass is brittle if you break it, but it has that disposition in it. It is to say what it would do under certain conditions. Another one of these thinkers, Brian Ellis, said the essential properties of things are dispositional. So classic science will say as follows. Classic science will say A causes B, so there is an external sequence. A dispositional view is different. Things possess powers, tendency, or dispositions. A seed is disposed toward becoming a tree. A magnet is disposed to attract iron. A knife is disposed to being sharp when our finger touches it. Sandpaper is rough. It's only rough in the instance that something smooth is scratched on it. So modern philosophy has increasingly challenged the Hume's thought of the world as a chain of external causes and effects. This kind of reminds you of the Maimonides that he was talking about, are
Right.
we born
Correct.
bad or are we born
That's
good?
funny.
So
Right.
philosophers from Gilbert Ryle to Elizabeth Anscombe and Brian Ellis have argued that the deepest features of reality are not merely events, but dispositions, virtues, and powers. So that is so similar to some of the text that we looked at. And the Torah's grammar in this asher hints at something richer. Blessing is not merely conditional, it is generative. A mitzvah does not simply earn blessing, it creates the kind of person for whom blessing becomes natural. Modern philosophers could call this a dispositional account of reality. Ben Azai said it centuries earlier, schar mitzvah mitzvah. And I always knew about this dispositional philosophy, but I was reminded of it when I was reading Shai Held's book about Judaism is about love. So to give you an example, because we're talking about hearing, he's talking about how can you command somebody to love his fellow? V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. And so he says, notice that we're not seeing two passages from Maimonides, whereas the first holds that love your neighbor refers to concrete kindness we perform for others. Okay, so Maimonides in that position, he says you can't command love, but you command actions of love. The second position of Maimonides maintains that his concern is with what we wish for others. In one place, then, Maimonides seems to belong to the positive action school, but in the other, he appears to belong to the emotional school. Which one is it? Asks Shai Held. Does he think love your neighbor refers to emotions or to actions? Asks Shai Held. And Shai answers, my sense is that he thinks it refers to both. For Maimonides, love is a disposition, a quality of character, and as such, it is both emotional and actional dimensions. I want only good for my neighbor, and I act accordingly. And I think that sums up my read of what asher means. It's not conditional, it is behavioral, it is dispositional. You create the conditions for doing another mitzvah and for listening to the mitzvot.
And actually, you were clearly walking home with us on Shabbat afternoon because that would have answered Sharon's question. And that's what it means. Asher tishna'u, v'haya'im shamoa. That's not the end. That's just creating the situation that will set up the next mitzvah. And once you have the next mitzvah, then schar mitzvah, mitzvah, the reward of doing one mitzvah is performing another mitzvah. This is great. Parshat Re'eh, each one of these weeks, Jeffrey and Devarim, one is better than the next. And this one is really, really good today.
Well, Shabbat Shalom. Let us all wish that we shall all be disposed to having a Shabbat Shalom and to making of ourselves what we want to be. Shabbat Shalom, and we'll see you
Shabbat
all
Shalom from
next
Jerusalem.
week.
See you next week. Be well.
The Torah's question isn't only whether we're doing the right thing today, it's whether today's actions are creating the person we'll be tomorrow. So here's my question for you. What is one habit in your life that isn't just changing what you do, but is changing who you are? I'd love to hear from you.